and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to be doing an updated presidential election prediction for the month of July between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But before I start, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you know when we upload, and also leave a like and comment. And with that said, let's get into it. I'm recording this just a few days after the first debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, which was very widely agreed to be a victory for Donald Trump. And since then, there has been a polling shift and kind of an energy shift towards Donald Trump, and that is going to be reflected in this prediction. So, like always, I'm going to start with the solid states for Donald Trump, and those are going to be Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, 3rd Congressional District, Nebraska's 1st Congressional District, Nebraska at large, Alaska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, and South Carolina, and also Maine's 2nd Congressional District. As for the solid states for Joe Biden, those are going to be Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, D.C., Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine's 1st Congressional District. Next, I'm going to fill in the likely states for each candidate, starting with Donald Trump and starting with the state of Texas. Texas is a state that has been trending towards Democrats for a while now. In 2012, Mitt Romney won the state by 16 points, and then in 2016, Donald Trump won it by less than 10 points. He won it by around 9 points. Then in 2020, Trump only won it by around 5.5 points. For a while, I thought Texas was going to be a lot closer this year, but because Trump has been doing so well in polling, and especially polling very well with Hispanic voters, I do think Texas is going to trend a little bit back towards Republicans this year. I think Trump's probably going to win it by around 8 points, so I am calling Texas likely Republican. The next and last likely Republican state is going to be the state of Florida. Florida is a state that's actually been trending towards Republicans. In 2012, Barack Obama won the state over Mitt Romney very narrowly. Then in 2016, Donald Trump narrowly won the state over Hillary Clinton. And then in 2020, Biden was leading the polls in Florida, but Trump ended up winning it by a margin much larger than expected. He won it by almost 3.5 points. And ever since then, Florida has continued to trend towards Republicans. In 2018, Ron DeSantis was elected governor narrowly in a blue wave year. And in 2022, he was reelected by a margin of nearly 20 points. Because of the trends in the state of Florida and how well Donald Trump has been doing in the polling recently, I do think he's going to win Florida by a bigger margin. I think he's going to win it by around 9 points, so I am calling it likely Republican. Next up are going to be the likely states for Joe Biden, starting with the state of New Mexico. In recent years, New Mexico has favored Democrats, but not by outlandish margins usually. In 2016, Donald Trump lost the state by 8 points, and in 2020, Joe Biden won the state by around 11 points. Recent polling has actually shown New Mexico to be a little closer than that. Most polling seems to have New Mexico within 6 to 8 points. I saw a poll recently that had Donald Trump within 2 points of winning New Mexico, but that was a Republican internal, so I would take that with a grain of salt. Overall, I do think Biden is probably going to win New Mexico by around 8 points, so I am calling it likely Democrat. The next likely Democrat state is kind of a wild one, and it's going to be the state of New Jersey. New Jersey has not even been remotely competitive in a very long time. The last time it voted for a Republican was for George H.W. Bush in 1988, and the last time it was within 10 points for the Democratic candidate was in 2004. Recently, there have been signs that New Jersey is trending towards Republicans. For example, the 2021 governor race, Jack Ciattarelli got within 3 points of beating incumbent Phil Murphy. And even though governor races can be wildly different from presidential races, it does show that in the right circumstances, Republicans can get within striking distance in New Jersey. Polling has also shown Biden to be pretty weak in New Jersey this cycle. Coefficient actually released a poll a couple days ago that had Trump up by 1 in New Jersey, and I don't think Trump's going to win the state of New Jersey. I don't really think that's on the table. But even Emerson has been putting out polls that have Trump within about 5 points in New Jersey. Again, I think that's a little too close too, but I could see New Jersey getting into the single digits, maybe like a 9.5 point victory for Joe Biden. So I am calling New Jersey likely Democrat. The final likely state for Joe Biden is going to be Maine at large. Maine is another state that is reliably Democratic, but can get close under the right circumstances. In 2016, Hillary Clinton only won the state by 3 points, but then in 2020, when it was a much more favorable year to Democrats, Joe Biden won the state by almost 10 points. There hasn't been much polling in Maine this cycle, but the polling that has been conducted does have Trump within striking distance in Maine and even leading in some cases. And Maine also typically doesn't vote too far to the left of New Hampshire, which I will get to later. But taking everything into account, I think I'm going to say Maine's going to vote for Biden by a little more than 5 points, so I am calling Maine likely Democrat. With all the solid and likely states now filled in, we have Joe Biden at 198 and Donald Trump at 219. So now I'm going to go west to east, filling in all of the toss-up states, starting with the state of Nevada. Nevada has been trending towards Republicans ever since 2008. In 2012, Mitt Romney lost it by about 6 points. Then in 2016, Donald Trump lost it by 2.4 points. And then in 2020, Donald Trump lost it by just under 2.4 points. So it was a very, very slight trend towards Republicans. But given the fact that the entire country shifted towards Joe Biden in 2020, that means Nevada trended more significantly to the right than any other swing state. And polling has been varied in Nevada. There are polls that have Trump winning by 8 points, and there are polls that have Biden winning. Overall, the polls seem to average around 3 to 4 points for Donald Trump. I do think it's worth mentioning that Nevada polling can overestimate Republicans. For example, in 2022, Adam Laxalt, the Republican nominee for Senate, was supposed to win the Senate race, but Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent Democrat, ended up winning by a very slim margin anyway. And in the governor race, that one did flip to the Republicans, but it was by a narrower margin than the polls predicted. However, in 2020, the polls actually overestimated Joe Biden and underestimated Donald Trump, so it is possible for polls to underestimate Trump in Nevada like what happened in 2020. Overall, I do think Trump is going to win Nevada by a couple points, so I am calling Nevada lean Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Arizona, which almost has the opposite trends of Nevada. Ever since 2008 or 2012, Arizona has been trending towards Democrats, and in 2020 it finally flipped after not voting for a Democrat since Bill Clinton in 1996. The biggest reason for these trends is that Arizona is becoming less white, which makes it less favorable to Republicans because Republicans tend to lose minorities and do well with white people. And the white people that are in Arizona, especially in Maricopa County, don't really like Trump all that much. In 2020, Biden was the first Democrat to win Maricopa County, Arizona since 1948. However, just like nationwide, Trump has been polling very well in Arizona. On 538 right now, he's leading by 5 points, which is a larger lead than he ever had in 2020 in the state of Arizona. And the polls in Arizona are a lot less varied than they are in Nevada. Trump seems to be winning almost every poll. Joe Biden hasn't won a poll, at least on the 538 list, since May. Now, because of the trends in the state of Arizona, I don't think Donald Trump is going to win the state by 5 points, even though in 2020 the polling average did underestimate him. Now I think it's probably overestimating him a little bit. I don't think the trends are going to revert so much that Trump wins it by 5 points, which is more than he won the state by in 2016. But I do still think he's going to win it by a couple points, probably around the same margin as Nevada, so I am going to call it lean Republican. Next up is going to be Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, and this is one that has been trending towards Democrats. Mitt Romney won this by a very large margin, and then in 2016, Donald Trump only won it by 2 points. In 2020, Joe Biden flipped it by over 6 points. And then during redistricting, it did favor Republicans more, but it's still a Democratic-leaning district. And the reason for that is because Nebraska's 2nd congressional district contains Omaha and a lot of its suburbs, and the suburbs are the main area of the country that has been trending the most against Republicans, especially Donald Trump. Now, because the district did get more Republican in redistricting, and Donald Trump is doing so well nationally in polls, I do think that this is going to be closer than it was in 2020, but I don't think Trump's going to win it. I think Biden's going to win it by around 4 points, so I am going to call it lean Democrat. Next up is going to be the state of Minnesota, which currently has the longest active streak of not voting for a Republican, as it did not vote for Ronald Reagan in 1984 when every other state did. The last time Minnesota voted for a Republican on the presidential level was 1972 for Richard Nixon. However, it did get very close to voting for a Republican in 2016 when Donald Trump only lost the state by around 1.5 points, but that's because there were a lot of third-party votes in that election and Hillary Clinton was a very unpopular candidate. Right now, Biden has a 1.7 point lead on the 538 average in Minnesota, and RFK's numbers keep going down. So it seems like the way for Minnesota to flip is for there to be a high third party turnout. And of course, there is RFK, who is polling pretty high in some places and not polling very high in others. Right now, in the 538 average in Minnesota, Joe Biden has a 1.7 point lead over Trump, and Kennedy is at 8.3%. So that is a pretty high third party turnout for a state. But his vote share keeps decreasing as time goes on, and Biden already has the lead in the state. So I do think Biden is going to win Minnesota by a couple points. It's going to be less than 2020, but I think it's going to be more than 2016. I'm going to call it lean Democrat for now. Next up is going to be the state of Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is an interesting state to talk about because it hadn't voted for a Republican on the presidential level from 1984 until 2016 when Trump won it in an upset over Hillary Clinton. He won it by 0.8 points roughly. Then in 2020, Joe Biden flipped it back. However, he flipped it back by a very narrow margin, around 0.6. And even though Biden did win the state in 2020, he still underperformed polls by around 6 points, and Trump outperformed polls by around 6 points. Same in 2016. Trump outperformed the polling in Wisconsin by around 6 points to win the state. Right now, Trump has a 1 point lead in the state of Wisconsin, according to 538. And given that polls tend to underestimate Trump in Wisconsin, I do think he's going to win Wisconsin by a slightly bigger margin. Usually, polls do underestimate Republicans in Wisconsin. The only election I can think of where that didn't happen in recent memory was 2022. But overall, right now, because of polling and because of the momentum that Trump has, I do think he's probably going to win Wisconsin by around 3 points, so I am going to call Wisconsin lean Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Michigan. And just like Wisconsin, Michigan flipped in 2016 to Trump by a very narrow margin, around 0.3%. And then in 2020, it flipped back to Joe Biden by around 2.5 points. And before Trump won the state of Michigan in 2016, Michigan had been a very blue state on the presidential level. Obama carried it by wide margins both times he won. In 2000 and 2004, Bush lost the state, and in 1992 and 1996, Clinton had won the state. The last time Michigan went to a Republican was in 1988. So Trump does have kind of a unique strength in Michigan that allowed him to win it the first time. And in 2020, despite everything, he was still within striking distance in the state. And the biggest reason Biden was able to flip the state back was because he appealed to the white working class in the state, and his ideas on the economy got them to vote for him. But now Joe Biden has very low approval on the economy, and so I do think that gives Trump a slight edge in the state because voters will probably look at the economy when Trump was president versus now when Biden is president, and I think they're going to favor Trump in that area. As for polling, just like most other states, Trump is doing a lot better in the polls in Michigan this time around than he was in 2020. And in 2020, just like in Wisconsin, Trump was underestimated in the Michigan polling. Right now, he's leading the polls in Michigan on 538 by 1.8 points. I think he's going to win Michigan. I think it's going to be narrow, but I am going to call Michigan tilt Republican. Next, we're going to go on down to the state of Georgia. And Georgia is probably the most favorable swing state to Donald Trump on my map. In 2016, he won the state by over 5 points, and then in 2020, Georgia flipped. It was kind of a surprise, even though Biden was leading in the polls. Not a lot of people expected Georgia to actually flip, but then he flipped it by a very narrow 0.2%. And despite the trends in Georgia, especially in the Atlanta suburbs and Atlanta itself that have been making it more favorable to Democrats, it does seem like Trump losing in 2020 was kind of a fluke because in 2022, Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, won re-election by over 7 points, despite the fact that the year was not as favorable to Republicans as people expected. In the Senate race, Herschel Walker lost to Raphael Warnock in a runoff, but it was a very close election, and Walker was a very bad candidate, so it made sense that the Senate race went to the Democrats that year. Right now on 538, Trump is leading the polling average in Georgia by 6.6 points, and on Real Clear Politics, he's leading by 4 points. If he did win by 6.6 points, that would be even bigger than his 2016 victory, and because of the trends in Georgia, I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think he's going to win Georgia by probably 4 points. Because of how well he's doing in the polls in other states, and because of how well he's doing in national polling, it's really hard for me to see him losing in the state of Georgia. And I think he's going to win by a couple points, so I am going to call it lean Republican. Next up is going to be the state of North Carolina. And North Carolina is a state that Trump won twice already. He won it by 3 points in 2016, and he won it by a little less than that, 1.5 points in 2020. Right now, he's leading the polls on 538 by 7.2 points, and he's leading by over 6.5 points on Real Clear Politics, which both of those would be considered likely Republican by my own margins, but I don't think he's going to win by quite that much. I think it will be to the right of Georgia, but I don't think it's quite going to be that 5 point margin that I call likely Republican. So I am still calling North Carolina lean Republican, although it's definitely the most favorable of the toss up states on this map. I said that about Georgia because I forgot North Carolina was a toss up. It's definitely North Carolina. Next up is going to be the state of Virginia. And this is actually the first time this election cycle that I have considered Virginia to be a toss up state. In fact, at the beginning, I actually had Virginia as solid Democrat. But as time has gone on, it's been more clear that Virginia is probably going to be more competitive in 2024. Most recent polling does have Trump within striking distance in Virginia. A lot of them only have him down by a point or even tied, but I haven't seen him lead a poll yet in Virginia. Overall, it looks like Biden has a slight edge in Virginia, especially considering the trends in the state over the last couple of years. In 2012, Barack Obama won the state of Virginia by 4 points, and then in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the state by 5 points. Then in 2020, Joe Biden won the state by 10 points. So Virginia has been trending towards Democrats for quite some time now. In fact, Obama was the first Democrat to win Virginia on the presidential level since LBJ in 1964. So yeah, Virginia has been trending towards Democrats. However, in 2021, Virginia did elect a Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin. And in 2022, the general congressional ballot was close. And in 2023, Republicans almost won the legislative chambers. Though they did not end up winning it, they were one seat short in both houses. I do think Biden's going to win the state of Virginia, but I think the double-digit win that he had in 2020 was a bit of a fluke. I think Virginia is going to be closer than that this year, so I am going to call Virginia lean Democrat. Next, we're going to move up to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is another state that voted for Obama in 2008 and 12, then flipped to Trump in 2016 by 0.7 points, then flipped back to Biden in 2020 by around 1.2 points. Again, Trump as a Republican kind of has a special appeal to places like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin in the Rust Belt. And he has been leading the polling in Pennsylvania. Right now on 538, he's leading by 2 points. And on Real Clear Politics, he's leading by 3 points. And the polls in Pennsylvania seem to be showing a consistent Trump lead. Every once in a while, there will be a poll that puts Biden ahead, but recently, polling has been very good for Trump in Pennsylvania. Overall, I do think Trump's going to flip Pennsylvania back by a couple points, so I'm going to call it lean Republican. Finally, we have the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire has been trending towards Democrats. In 2016, Donald Trump won it very narrowly by less than a point. Then in 2020, Joe Biden won it by over 7 points. And like I said earlier, Maine doesn't tend to vote that far to the left of New Hampshire. And just like Maine, polls have been showing New Hampshire to be a lot closer than the states were in 2020. Right now, polling is close, but it does give Biden a slight edge. However, St. Anselm poll, the most accurate poll in New Hampshire in 2020, just released a poll yesterday that had Trump leading by 2. However, in 2022, they did have Don Bolduc winning the Senate race. He ended up losing it by 9 points. So it does seem like this poll can be hit or miss. But even in June of last year, or last election cycle, they were very accurate with the presidential results. So I would say they're a pretty good pollster. Despite that, a lot of the other polls, like I mentioned, are showing Biden with a lead. So I do think Biden is going to win the state by a couple points. So I'm calling New Hampshire lean Republican, or lean Democrat, Now, with the whole map filled out, I have Donald Trump being elected to a second term as president, winning 312 electoral votes to incumbent President Joe Biden's 226. This is the biggest lead I've had for Trump in my predictions so far this election cycle. I have never had him winning all of the 6 big swing states before, but because of recent events and Joe Biden's poor polling performance, his poor debate performance, and just the general trend of this election, I do think Trump is kind of running away with it at this point. I'm not sure how the debate will affect polling long term, but what I do think it did was it affected people's perception of Joe Biden and his ability to take this election back. Because right now it was pretty widely accepted that he wasn't favored and that he was down in the polls. But a lot of Democrats were hoping that in the final months of this election cycle, we're only 4 months away, that he would be able to turn it around and take back the election from Trump. But I think it killed a lot of people's confidence that he'd be able to do that, seeing him on stage not being able to answer questions. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you know when we upload. Also, leave a like and comment and let me know what you agree with and what you disagree with. And thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.